Let me begin with the most important thing. My friend of 30 years, Dennis Prager, has taken a fall and suffered a very serious injury. He has posted about it, or Alan did, at the Prager account on X. On Tuesday morning, PragerU founder and our dear friend Dennis Prager suffered a serious back injury following a fall. He's resting in a local Los Angeles hospital as doctors assess treatment options. We will keep you informed of his condition. In the meantime, Dennis welcomes the healing power of your prayers. So please, please do lift up Dennis in your prayers, to lift up Sue, lift up his children and his grandchildren, lift up Alan and everybody at PragerU and all of his friends. I'm deeply upset by this because Dennis is a force of nature, and if anyone can recover from a serious injury, it's Dennis. But I called in the big guns last night, texted Archbishop Chaput, and I said, okay. I texted all my friends, just pray for Dennis, because God is a good God. Dennis believes in him. Done a lot of good work on behalf of God over the last 30 years, 40 probably. My lovely wife we had visitors from law school in town for the Federalist Society, and as she was going out the door, I said, I read Dennis's Exodus book every day. And it's sort of, Dennis is part of the family, part of your family too, if you listen to the Dennis Prager Show. So pray for him, pray for Sue, his children, grandchildren, Alan, the entire team. To the news of the day. I have no opinion on Tulsi Gabbard. I am assured by Lindsey Graham that she's smart and earnest and hardworking. The hearings, I trust the Senate. I have lots of opinions on Matt Gaetz, and you've heard me express them here for a long time. Kevin McCarthy has been my friend for 35 years, longer than I've known Dennis Prager. And Kevin McCarthy was ousted from the speakership because of Matt Gaetz. And I do not believe Matt Gaetz is responsible, and I don't think he should be near the fifth floor of the Department of Justice, and I trust the Senate. I do remind he's resigned from the House. Donald Trump could be playing 4D chess here because Matt Gaetz wanted to end the ethics investigation in the House. They lose jurisdiction when a member resigns, so that proceeding is closed, but their paper isn't closed, and that goes to the Senate Judiciary Committee. The FBI opens a full field background investigation of Matt Gaetz, and Matt Gaetz has to testify for as long as the Senate Judiciary Committee wants, and all of that is under oath, subject to the penalties of 18 U.S.C. 1001. And so if he lies during the course of that hearing, it's a felony. If he doesn't lie, he's going to have to persuade people that everything that's been said about him, and I'm not going to repeat it here because I don't produce, I'm not interested in rumors and innuendos and reports and gossip. All I know is he destroyed the Republican coalition and is often irresponsible and erratic. Not what I want in an attorney general. I'm a veteran of DOJ. Spent most of my time there for William French Smith, a couple of months with Ed Meese before I went to the White House counsel's office, and it's not what the Department of Justice needs. They needed Radcliffe, who went to the CIA, and I knew that Director Radcliffe wanted the CIA and not justice. He told me that. And I know that there are a lot of people who could do that. Ambassador O'Brien could be brought in for a year. Ambassador A.B. Culverhouse both worked for Trump. There are a lot of Trump loyalists. Matt Whitaker is around. You can find a lot of people to run justice. It might be the proverbial 4D chess that people joke about, because Matt Gaetz resigned from the House in order to close. So he's gone. No office, no staff. There'll be 2 special elections in Florida, one for Michael Waltz, one for Matt Gaetz. But I just trust the Senate. Our Constitution is very strong. I trust the Senate. I do not believe he will be confirmed. The only downside to this is it's a circus. And the president-elect had a winning streak going, the hot hand at the table. Everything was going great. In fact, I was on with Dana Perino and Bill Hemmer yesterday, Trey Gowdy, Josh Kraushaar, cut number 16 as Donald Trump returned to town.
Hugh, would love your historical perspective here. Well, I worked for Richard Nixon out of college, Dana, and up until this moment, Richard Nixon was the greatest political comeback story in American political history. Now Donald Trump is the greatest political comeback story in American political history because Richard Nixon was never shot in the head. And so I think we are witnessing history today, and it's going to continue to unfold. Very happy with the rapid rollout of the team across all the different silos. More will be coming, no doubt, in short order. Good campaign, great transition, hopefully an extraordinarily successful second term for Donald Trump.
We went on, cut number 17.
Hugh, I was thinking with Carl about a half an hour ago about what Trump learned from the first time around and whether or not they can make him more experienced and a better commander-in-chief and perhaps maybe a better manager of the U.S. government along the way. He had a noticeable disdain for the intelligence community the first time around. I don't know how much you've thought about that going into a second term now, 4 years removed, but what comes to mind, do you think, when you look at some of the appointments and maybe how he's carving his way through that part of the U.S. government?
First thing that comes to mind, Bill, is he's not going to sit down with the equivalent to Jim Comey, Jim Clapper, and John Brennan and get ambushed again, which destroyed a lot of the momentum in the first term and led to the Mueller investigation and the Russia stuff. I think he has done, I got to disclose, my son works for Mike Waltz, so I've got to put that on the table whenever I talk about this. By bringing Waltz into the NSA job, National Security Advisor job, by bringing J.D. Vance into the vice presidency, he has pipelines right back to the Senate and to the House, which are effective. They're very, very well-respected members of those bodies. J.D. Vance is in the leadership vote this morning. Mike Waltz was in the leadership vote this morning. His whole team, including Pete Hegseth, and I hope we get to that because I've got smoke coming out of my ears listening to some of these elite snobs in the Beltway saying Pete Hegseth can't be Department of Defense Secretary.
Okay, then the president showed up, so we cut away to that. Then we came back. Cut number 18.
Go ahead, Hugh, and finish your thought.
I'm just going to say the personal satisfaction here has got to be extraordinary. But John Ratcliffe at the CIA and said to be Marco Rubio at State Department, Elise Stefanik is a brilliant person to lead the West and voice America's concerns at the UN. Susie Wiles is liked by, I don't know her very well, talked to her once, liked by everybody. I just think he's put together a top-tier national security team, and I hope the economic team, and I hope Pete Hegseth gets the fair hearing he deserves, because anyone who reads his book, War on Warriors, will know he knows what he's talking about on DOD.
Cut number 19.
And Hugh Hewitt, if you want to, we'll give you a chance here. You want us to talk a little bit more about some of the picks on the national security side. We've mentioned them, but Pete Hegseth, you flagged for wanting to have a chance to talk a little bit more.
Yeah, because Pete Hegseth got slandered by a bunch of people on X last night. And, he's won 2 Bronze Stars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's written a number of very good books about the military. He is competent and he is eloquent, something you said, Dana. The ability to communicate is so essential to effective governance. I want to pick up on something that Trey mentioned. You get 2 big swings, 2 budget reconciliation cycles. I hope the president-elect tells both bodies, I want a lot done in the budget and the reconciliation. I want it done fast. When Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy bring back a blueprint for consolidating and streamlining government, I want that in the second budget and reconciliation. EPA ought to be at Interior. The Army Corps of Engineers should not be screwing up people's ability to build houses and buildings. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service should be collapsed and given to the state. There's a lot they can do. It will have to be in the second budget reconciliation. But the Trump tax package and things like zeroing out NPR and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, that's got to be in the first one. It ought to be in the first 100 days.
I did write at length about the budget reconciliation process yesterday, and I submitted it. Now, Gates is a bump in the road. I'm not happy about that, but you can't bet 1,000. And it might be 4D chess. He's out of the House. He might be out of our hair forever. He wants to run for governor of Florida anyway. And that's up to Florida if he gets the nomination. I think I'm for the Democrat. That would be a first. I'm just here to tell you, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on Matt Gaetz. I'm going to play for you some clips in the next segment or later in the program. The early reaction from the senators confirms what I think. He won't be confirmed, so I'm just not going to waste a lot of time on it. Tulsi Gabbard, I got an open mind. I just don't know. She met with Assad. Ever since then, I haven't much paid attention to her. She's a Democrat. I don't spend my time on Democrats. I do think that the budget reconciliation package. Congratulations to John Thune. Thanks to John Kernan and Rick Scott for offering to serve even more than they already do. John Thune will be a great majority leader, succeeding Mitch McConnell, and I believe the Senate will do its job. I have great faith in the Constitution of the United States. That's why I teach constitutional law. Selena Zito is in Yinzer land. Special Yinzer report. Selena, good morning to you. How are you?
Oh, good morning, sunshine. I'm awesome. How are you?
I am great. Dave McCormick is your senator-elect. I want you to tell us, what is Bob Casey doing, and does it have a prayer of working?
No, it doesn't have a prayer of working. He's allowed the McCormick fell just slightly short of the 0.5% trigger by a couple thousand, not by a couple thousand, by a couple hundred. And Casey is allowing that trigger to go into effect. He could have stopped it, but he didn't. And the result's going to be the same. And there's it's a really sad way for him to exit, having held statewide office since 1996. And this is basically the only job he's ever had, and that's in elected office. And sometimes these guys really really have a hard time letting go. The only other thing it could be is someone either in his family or on his staff is pushing him to do this. But the Democrats that I talked to all across the state, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, people that have been his allies and his friends, are just wishing that he was not doing this. This is
There is
leaving
this
with
stuff
grace.
about there's this stuff about ballots being challenged, or Casey trying to get illegal ballots in, and the McCormick lawyers stopping it. Kind of like a
Yeah,
knife fight,
that's
precinct by precinct. But it's 28,000. I said this after the Trump loss in 2020. If your margin is more than 1,000 in a recount, you can't reverse it. I've studied. I wrote a book about election fraud in 2004. If you're not within 1,000 votes, you don't have a prayer.
that's true. And there was another governor. He wasn't governor then. He became governor 2 years later of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell. Sort of got tired of Al Gore dragging out the election and went public. He was the DNC chair at that time and said, "Hey, you know what? It's time to concede." And someone needs to be Ed Rendell in this moment and step up and say what everybody is saying to themselves.
All right. Let me move to Ohio, because you cover my home state as well as anybody, because Yinzerland is close up to the border there. Mike DeWine has a choice. I have seen all the names: Matt LaRose, Matt Dolan, Dave Yost, Jane Timken. What do you think he is thinking? What do you think he will do to replace J.D. Vance in the United States Senate?
I think it's Rhodes. Um, you know, I just think it's a good fit for him and a good fit for Ohio. I think that Yost is more suited based on comportment and his abilities to run for governor. And so that's the way I think it goes. What do you think? I
They
don't
got
know.
to
What do
run
you
Frank
think?
LaRose or whoever. They got to run in 2026, and then they have to run in
Yeah.
2028. So you got to
Yeah.
be able to raise a lot of money, and you want to have to be able to nonstop for 4 years. John Thune did this back in 2000 and
Yeah.
2002, and Dave McCormick did it. And it's
Yeah.
three races in 4 years, and it's just that you just have to really want to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's every night on the road. You know what it's like, Selena.
Oh yeah, I covered soon. I covered that election and those consequent, those elections after that. But also Joe Manchin did this. And you do have to be dedicated, and you do really want to uh do this job and be good at this job. And I think all of those people have proven that they have been. So you have to, when you're thinking about this, you have to look at them and talk to them and ask them, how did this go? What did what were your experiences like? How did you get through it? How were you able to govern, but also run, but also raise money?
Selena, I have a question for you. Um, Have you ever met Terry Pluto, the senior sports writer in Ohio? He works for Cleveland.com. He does the podcast Terry's Talking. He's our age. He does a lot of prison ministry. He's a great man, a great writer. He and Dave Campbell do this podcast every week. And it just seems to me that the two of you are like the smartest people about Ohio and Pennsylvania. Have you ever met him?
No, I haven't, but I'm a huge fan. So if you can make that happen, that would be awesome.
I think you ought to go up and do a column on a guy who has devoted his life to Northeastern Ohio sports fans,
Yeah.
and he does prison ministry. He's just a wonderful guy. It just occurred
Yeah.
to me. Now let's get to those are two of my friends, my radio friends. I would like to meet and hear what you guys say to each other. Now let's talk about the downs. Everything was going great, and I did
Yeah.
Fox and News with
I
Dana
watched you.
Perino and Bill Hemmer in the morning. Everything was going great. I get home yesterday afternoon. Dennis Prager has had a serious injury. That's terrible. And we're praying for him. And then President-elect Trump announces Matt Gaetz. I do not believe he will be confirmed. What do you think?
No, I don't either. And don't make me say anything because my mom always taught me if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
But we're in the business, Selena.
Oh,
We're in the
darn
business.
it.
What?
I knew you were going to make me. I knew you were going to make me say something. I'd like to believe this is like some fourth level chess move that he's making, and maybe it is, but that I do not believe that he's going to be confirmed. I do not believe that. Just by all the initial reactions out of the Senate. He's not a very well liked guy. And okay, maybe you don't have to be liked to be good at your job. He isn't a very well respected guy either. So there is lies the difference. And I would be. I mean, nothing shocks me in American politics. Maybe he's confirmed, but I got to say, I'd be shocked if he was confirmed. I would be
It's
shocked if
interesting
he was
about
even.
the 4D chess. I always laugh at people who talk about 4D chess, but I actually put it on X this morning because he did resign from the House in a vain attempt to make the House Ethics Committee irrelevant to his hearings because they get all the paperwork. But I don't know if you've ever been through a full field background investigation. I've done 3 of them. All of a sudden, your third grade teacher's getting a knock at the door, and everyone you've ever done work with. And this is what the FBI does well, is that they vet people. Obviously, they didn't vet the CIA guy who stole all the secrets of Israel and put them on the web, but they vet most people very, very well, especially the attorney general. And they're going to have it's going to be a long FBI investigation. And I don't think the recess appointment's going to help because I don't think the Senate's going to go out of session for like 2 months.
Yeah, I maybe it is fourth. I mean, come on, we've lived through McConnell. He is the master at fourth level chess maneuvers. So maybe Trump learned a thing or two from him, or maybe he learned a thing or two from Trump. But I just can't see it happening that he passes the confirmation process. Or I'll even
Last
go
question,
further.
Selena.
I don't think yet.
Go ahead.
No, I don't even know if it gets to that part to get to there.
Nah, it can be Harriet Myers, and Harriet Myers was qualified. And
Yeah.
I was for Harriet Myers, and I'm actually curious about what happens with Tulsi Gabbard. I'm not saying no. I don't. She might get through. I just know that a lot of senators were just elected. And I'll name 4. Uh, Governor Justice of West Virginia, Tim Sheehy in Montana, Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania, and Bernie Moreno in Ohio. They are going to be up for reelection after Donald Trump has retired. And what they do on Congressman Gaetz will matter in their reelection campaign. And it's a gift to the Democrats for getting off the ground and getting reorganized. I just don't see it happening. Now, let's talk about our favorite. Who's your favorite nominee? Because he was batting 1,000 until yesterday.
Who's my favorite nominee? Well, Marco Rubio. I've always been a big fan of Rubio. He came. I remember covering him in 2010, I think it was, when he ran against Charlie. Was it Charlie Crist at that
Yep.
moment? For and I just he had the conservative populism that has now become the mainstay of the Republican Party, but he also had the chops in terms of his knowledge and abilities in foreign relations. And so, I think he's an excellent pick.
Selena Zito, it is always good to talk to you. Follow Selena Zito on X at Zito Selena and follow everything that she writes for the Examiner, for the Pittsburgh Post Gazette, for the New York Post, for everybody in the world at selenazito.com. Thank you, Selena.
Thank
Always
you.
good to see you. Dr. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, joins me from Israel. Dr. Oren, good morning. Can you fill us in on the state of the war in Lebanon? Because there are a lot of videos this morning on IDF strikes in Beirut, which are hitting Hezbollah weapons sites and the suburbs where they are congregated. How goes the war in Lebanon?
Well, I think it goes well, Hugh. It goes well, but it's not over. And the fact of the matter is, we've been degrading Hezbollah on a daily basis. You see this. We know we've taken out much of their leadership. We've probably eliminated a huge swath of their missile capabilities, their drone capabilities, their factories, their ability to transfer weapons from Syria into Lebanon. But the North is still getting pummeled with as many as 200 rockets a day. And they are able to fight on the ground as well. 6 of our soldiers were killed in a fire exchange last night. So it's not that Hezbollah is far from finished, and to a certain degree, they've been able to regroup after those measures, like the pagers and the walkie-talkies exploding, took out much of their senior and mid-level leadership. They've been able to regroup. So it's not over. I think what you're seeing now in the escalation of Israel's airstrikes against Hezbollah is part of the negotiating scene, because there's many rumors are rife here of an impending ceasefire in the north. And that ceasefire would have, from Israeli perspective, have to include Hezbollah's withdrawal to north of the Litani River in accordance with 1701 of the Security Council from 2006, and the entrance of the Lebanese army as sort of a buffer between Israel and Hezbollah in that area between the Litani and our northern border. But, and here's the huge but, will Israel be able to intervene in southern Lebanon if the IDF detects that Hezbollah is once again trying to establish itself there? And the Lebanese have totally rejected this. This is a violation of our sovereignty, as if their sovereignty actually ever exists. There's actually a sovereign place called Lebanon. It's an Iranian satrapy, and will that happen? And so right now, these bombings are little messages to convince Hezbollah that Israel still has the upper hand, and if they want this war to stop, that's going to be the condition.
I've also heard that Israel has now made public what it has long been doing privately, which is attacking arms shipments to Hezbollah through Syria, and that they're no longer even pretending not to do it. It's just open warfare on anyone trying to move weapons into Iran. True?
It's true, but I think that's an old story, and we're just being more open about it. I think the big issue is what degree is Israel willing to take steps against Lebanon itself? The other day I tweeted something that turned out to be quite controversial. Hezbollah rockets fell in and around our airport and stopped flights. And I tweeted, I don't get it. How come Hezbollah gets to fire at our airport and stop the flights to and from Israel while Beirut airport continues to operate freely? Just put a couple of holes in the runway. You don't have to blow up the whole airport. And I think at a certain point that Israel is going to have to put increasing pressure on Hezbollah by putting pressure on Lebanon. And it's not like Lebanon is a fully functioning sovereign country. It is under the thumb, and not just the thumb, probably the fifth, of Iran and Hezbollah.
Well, there were a couple of strikes very near Beirut International. I didn't hit the planes, but the video's out there. Let me switch now to Prime Minister Netanyahu. I know he's talked to President-elect Trump. I know he's talked to a bunch of people on the Republican side. How is his standing in Israel? You folks are polling more than we're polling. Has Bibi made a comeback?
I think he made a comeback. The question is not just Bibi. Bibi now is significantly ahead in terms of the person who Israelis feel is most qualified to be prime minister. Now, he pulled ahead of Naftali Bennett some weeks ago. The question is not Netanyahu. We don't have personal elections here. It's the Likud party, and the Likud party, by all polls, is still going to have a hard time putting together the next government. And dependent, would that be with ultra-Orthodox, without the ultra-Orthodox? There are other constellations that appear to be better poised to take the magical 61 or 62 numbers of Knesset members you need to put together a stable coalition.
Is that 2 years away, though, Dr. Orrin? If I understand, and I never get involved in politics of another country because I don't understand it, you know how little Americans actually understand Israeli politics. He's got a mandate for 2 more years unless the coalition falls. Do you expect the coalition to fall within 2 years?
Uh, there's nothing that appears right now an imminent threat. It could be the Haredi draft law. It could be the budget, though it looks like they're getting through the budget okay. Or it could be the new investigations against Netanyahu, which are making headlines here. I saw that they just made the New York Times front page. And that is the question whether, as accused, the prime minister's office indicated or undertook efforts to change the protocols of discussion between the prime minister and the military and the IDF on the morning of October 7th. Did the prime minister know about the impending Hamas attack and did nothing? Or is the situation, as he claims, he was never briefed by the IDF?
Two more questions. One, how long do investigations of prime ministers go on? Because it seems to me endless. And number two, situation report in Gaza, where it seems to me Hamas may still have some terrorists with guns, but they are not running anything. First, number one, how long do PM investigations go?
Well, Netanyahu this month is testifying in front of a jury about the corruption trials. He tried to put it off for another 5 months, but the court wouldn't accept his argument, and he has to, and out in the middle of a war, has to go and testify several hours a day for his defense against the corruption charges. There are a number of people in his office now have been arrested. One of them remains under arrest and about to be indicted. So that could also cast a pall on the government and have some type of impact politically here as well. We don't know. As for Hamas, again, a couple of days ago, 5 Israeli soldiers were killed by Hamas. They're still fighting. There are a segment of the Israeli population that says the war is basically over. Netanyahu is just perpetuating it in order to stay in office. That Israel could say, okay, we're getting out, we'll get the hostages back, and the war will be over. We've done enough damage to Hamas. Other parts of the population said, no, look, they're still fighting. And if we get out, they're going to retake the Gaza Strip and launch another October 7th. It's really almost divided the country in half. If I have a second, Hugh, I'd like to say a word about the appointments because they're very, in Israel, we're very excited about them. Marco Rubio, if it goes through, is a friend. I know him. He is a clear thinker. It's the best thing I can say about anybody in public life. He's a clear thinker. Mark Waltz, a champion of defense. All these people are willing to stand up to Iran and defend Israel's right to defend itself. Elise Stefanik, you'll be happy to hear, because Hugh, she was my student at a university I know that was close to your heart, a place named Harvard. I walked into her office a couple of weeks ago with a delegation of displaced Israelis from the north, and she said, "My professor, Professor Orrin, I gave her a good grade." And she's great. Oh my God, she's great. I mean, we got the dream team here. We really do. And now Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who I've known for years, and a delightful human being, a really truly delightful human being, a great soul.
Yeah, so I think Dr. Orrin, Mike Waltz is really something. My son works for him, has worked for him for 4 years. He's really brilliant. And when you've been shot at, and when you've shot at Taliban, it's not on the it's not a job qualification, but it certainly adds to the gravity you bring to the office to have been in combat. You know that, you've been in combat. Do you think I'm right about that people have been fired at and returned fire against bad guys? It makes a difference?
One of the big problems we faced in the previous administration was that almost nobody had worn a uniform and actually fought for their country and has never been in battle. If you can't be in battle, then you can't really understand war. And there's a huge debate, a huge divide between those who have and don't have it, certainly in the United States. And it actually had an impact on policy, a big impact on policy. Anybody thinks you can fight a war as we're fighting in Gaza and not have civilians who are being used as a human shield by Hamas being wounded and killed doesn't understand war.
Last question. I am a fan of Pete Hegseth because I know him. I've read his books. I've interviewed him. He's not a friend, but a radio friend. He's very, very smart. Princeton. You might have taught him at Princeton. Princeton, Harvard, 3 tours, 2 Bronze Stars. What do you think of Pete?
It sounds good to me. Really. I don't know him either. He's one of the few I actually don't know, but I've read about him. And I think he's going to do a great job. I really do. I'm very optimistic. Israel has to be smart in dealing with the president. We cannot dictate terms to the president. You can't pull the wool over this guy's eyes. You can't. You can't pull the same type of things you pulled with some previous presidents. You got to be upfront and you got to be listening. Not easy for Israelis all the time to listen, but that's my recommendation.
And Ambassador Huckabee is a great choice. Ambassador-select Huckabee. I expected Ambassador Friedman to go back, but, things change, and Ambassador Huckabee is going to be fine. Dr. Michael Oren, thank you for your extra time this morning. Always good to hear from you. Be safe, be well.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm joined by Noah Rothman, senior political writer for National Review. Noah, good morning to you. I want to begin by telling the audience who didn't hear the first hour, our friend Dennis Prager suffered a serious injury. Lift him up in your prayers. Don't know any more than that other than what's posted. They will continue to post at DennisPrager.com. Noah, let's start with the good news. Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, Elise Stefanik. I'm thrilled, over the moon with this trio. I always disclose my son works for Mike Waltz on the Hill, but I don't know what's happening, and I'm not in consultation with Mar-a-Lago. What do you think of the national security appointments? And Ratcliffe at the CIA.
Yeah, I'm so glad you started there, Hugh, because there are so many opportunities for us to throw our arms around one another in fraternal camaraderie here, because I share your enthusiasm for Marco Rubio at State, inspired pick, Ratcliffe at CIA. He's got the chops. He knows the institution. He's going to do very well there. Elise Stefanik at the United Nations, I think, is going to be a very effective advocate against that institution. Spending a lot of time in Congress prepares you to be surrounded with people who are wrong and are very confident in their wrongness. That's the skill you need to take to the United Nations. And Pete Hegseth, I don't have a problem. Kristi Noem is in there somewhere. We could skip past that one. Lee Zeldin going to EPA. I am very happy with that. I can't wait to see an administrator who treats his charge like the mistake that it is. And Hegseth at Pentagon. I think that institution needs a lot of shaking up. And Hegseth has, from all accounts, the trust of the service personnel. And I think he'll do a very good job.
Agree, by the way, on Zeldin and Hegseth. I've got Pete's book right here, and I was reading from it yesterday because I interviewed Pete. I posted the interview in June, The War Against Warriors, and it's a fabulous book. And the snide sneering that comes from the Beltway media elite just drove me crazy. The guy's got 2 Bronze Stars and all. He's smart.
Yeah, and he comes out of that world. He's a Princeton grad. He's a Harvard grad. He was a think tanker at Manhattan Institute briefly. He's got the chops. He's got the pedigree. What he advocates for is something that I don't think Democrats and progressives really want to acknowledge, which is the degree to which the military has become a testing ground for social engineering, which is having measurable downward pressure on recruitment. Recruitment pipelines come from military families, and military families have lost faith in this institution as something that molds warriors, that molds lethal executors of American national interests abroad, and turns them into an experiment to work out whatever the latest fad is that bubbled up from academia, and that turns off recruitment. We have a recruitment problem here. I think Hegseth, if he gets the leeway to do what I think he wants to do, will reverse that really unfortunate trend.
I agree, and I also think he's going to go and do something called Deep Select. He's going to go find warriors. And I hear from a lot of retired general officers that the Obama-era generals were not the greatest. Some were good, some were bad. I mean, if he went back and got Joe Dunford out of retirement, I'd be as happy as could be. But we'll see. We'll see about that. Let's turn to what we're not happy. I have no opinion on Tulsi Gabbard other than I wouldn't have picked her. But
I do.
I read...
Okay,
we agree on Matt Gaetz, so we don't have to spend any time on Matt Gaetz. I've already done that. Tell me what you think about Tulsi, because Lindsey Graham said something kind of nice. I just have never had her on the show because she met with Assad and I won't have anything to do with her.
Yeah, precisely. And the Trump administration shouldn't either. There's a reason why Tulsi Gabbard wasn't a Republican until 3 weeks ago. She has a worldview that I think is incompatible with the Republican Party. She and RFK Jr. both are what Jeane Kirkpatrick described as the blame America first crowd. She buys into every anti-American narrative that comes down the pike. She went to Syria's Assad. She apologized for his genocidal actions. She lent herself as a prop for the legitimacy of this regime, following in Nancy Pelosi's footsteps. She argued against the Trump administration's efforts, by the way, to contain Assad and his genocidal attacks on his own people using weapons of mass destruction. And the United States has a core interest in ensuring that weapons of mass destruction do not become the status quo of the battlefield, because U.S. soldiers will experience them first and foremost. U.S. soldiers are everywhere, and they will be on the front lines in that world conflict. And when it comes to Russia, she has bought into a narrative which is fantastical and unfounded, according, by the way, to people like Mikhail Gorbachev, that the United States is responsible for its wars of conquest, for its expansionist tendencies, just because they're pushed into it. We're just too mean. We, by allowing countries to express the full flower of their own sovereignty, to vote to get themselves into NATO, and the NATO's 33 members vote to allow them to get into NATO. All these sovereign democratic processes are illegitimate because Moscow doesn't like them. That's
okay.
antithetical
So
to
we
the
will
spirit
find
of
out.
American national
We
interest.
will
Now,
find
one more
out.
thing, Hugh, though, briefly. I'm sorry.
Got to get the gates, so we got to have time to get the gates.
Sure, but if Gifford's portfolio is only to rein in the intelligence institutions, because Donald Trump has a fear of those intelligence institutions, her conflicts with the rest of the security team will be far and few. If it's not, if she gets a portfolio related to national security, I think there's a lot of conflict in this administration coming up.
Yeah, the ODNI, Dan Coates couldn't get anything done. John Ratcliffe didn't want it because he wanted the CIA where the action is. I'm not sure that it really matters that much, but I will leave it to the Senate. Let's get to Matt Gaetz. And I want you to entertain with me the best possible construction on this. This is the best possible construction. Kevin McCarthy called up the president-elect and said, please nominate Matt Gaetz for AG. He'll resign the House to try and kill the House Ethics Committee, but it won't because the paperwork's all there. The FBI will do a full field background investigation. And when he testifies under oath and subject to 18 U.S.C. 1001, a felony for every misstatement. What do you think?
I can't imagine why he would want to subject himself to this, right? I mean, there's next to zero chance that ethics committee report never sees the light of day. There's no way that he's going to glide through a Senate confirmation process with that dangling over them, with the prospect of a conflagration in his position as AG when that stuff comes out, which implicates not only him then, but the entire U.S. Senate and the administration too. Why would the Senate majority sign themselves up for that? It boggles the mind. It's going to be a rough confirmation process for him. And while Mr. Gaetz has a profoundly well-stressed tolerance for embarrassment, even he is going to find that the level of mortification he'll be subjected to is going to be tough to bear.
Now, they're counting on the recess appointment process, but the president can't nominate until he's in office, January 20th. And the process begins immediately with the full field background investigation. I've been through 3 of those. They find your third grade teacher and everyone you've ever been in, every country you've ever been in, every dime you've ever spent. It is a deep probe into your personal life. Do you think he lasts longer than Harriet Miers?
Yes, I do. Only because George W. Bush's political capital was largely spent by the time Miers was nominated, and Republicans had a lot of leash from their voters to rein in the Bush administration. There's very little appetite to challenge the Trump administration in the immediate wake of his electoral victory, and Trump knows that, and the people around him know that, and they're trying to test their parameters of action. This is a big test, and it's probably not the last. There's going to be a lot of folks coming down the pike. I think the Senate is going to be leery of, and there's only so many bites of that apple that the Senate can get. You can police only so many kooks. The president gets the people he wants to surround himself with. So there's going to be a lot of people who squeak through this process just because the Senate doesn't have the capital to burn, but they do have some. The president doesn't get everybody he likes. There's usually a precedent where 1 and 2 go down. And this is a key example of one of those. This is also another reason why it was bad news when Trump was floating the prospect of recessing Congress so that he could get his appointees through. The suspicion was that his appointees would not survive a proper confirmation process. It's not just that it is civically appropriate for the Senate and the House to not shed their constitutionally delineated authority. It is good for Trump, to say nothing of the Republican Party, to police his worst instincts and to save him from himself, because these 2 picks are really bad. And if his instinct
I will say, Noel Canning is the decision by the Supreme Court decided in Noel Canning that a recess has got to be a real recess. And 4 justices who represented the originalist wing concurred and said a recess is only an intercession recess. So whatever you get through on the recess appointment, their actions will all be subject to being reversed. So it's not really a good strategy. But number two, they're going to come back. He doesn't get to make a nomination until the 21st of January. That's 72 days away. There's a lot of trees in the forest that are going to fall before then, Noah. A lot of timber going to be cut. And then the session's going to be, there isn't a recess for months and months, even if you want to be aggressive. I don't think some of these people make it through. Last word to you.
I hope you're right. I'm not sure. It's hard to. I'm terrible at predicting the future, and this is an unsettled future to predict. But that being said, the response from Republicans in the Senate to Matt Gaetz in particular has been really rough. He might not survive, but that means a lot of other Trump picks who are also on the fringes could glide through. Tulsi Gabbard being one of them.
Well, everybody goes. Neera Tanden went down. Biden's pick for OMB. Tom Daschle went down. Obama's pick for HHS. There's always a casualty, always at least one. I've written a column for Fox News on how budget reconciliation will work to extend the tax Trump cuts. Let me say that again. The Trump tax cuts, they're going to be revised and extended, made permanent, I hope. And all that you need is an agreement on how much the deficit's going to be. And then you agree on that. And the deficit right now, the debt is $35 trillion. And they're going to have to spend some more in order to launch productivity. And I just want you to be ready for that. And then they're going to have to get to work with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, bringing back the second reconciliation package for the next budget. Donald Trump gets two big swings. I explain it all in townhall.com and Fox News column. And if you go to foxnews.com, go to shop for news every morning, you'll find my column there under the opinion section, or I posted it on X. If you want to know what budget reconciliation means, it doesn't require breaking a Senate filibuster. It's under the budget reconciliation process. 51 votes is enough. So you can lose 3 Republicans, all right, on any particular law, and J.D. Vance can vote with the other 50, and it passes. I also want to tell you what should not happen during the lame duck. They're going to run judges through like we did. We being Republicans, and that's okay. Takes a long time, and Republicans can gum up the works a little bit. But we should not allow Big Pharma to get a windfall by delinking the PMBs from drugs. The pharmawindfall.com is posted by the Conservatives for Lower Healthcare Costs. And Big Pharma is a nightmare, and you know it, and I know it. They do great things. I love the science. I hate their politics. They're always got their hand out. They made a deal with the devil on the Obamacare, the devil being Obamacare, and the Senate majority at that time, Ted Kennedy. And they said, okay, we'll go along with ruining American healthcare system and rising costs for everyone and destroying the effectiveness of Medicaid and Medicare if you give us enough money. Their lobbyists did that. Their K Street people did that. And they do it again. And they're hoping to jam something through in the lame duck. But it will be subject to the filibuster. So I don't think it'll come. But nevertheless, Speaker Johnson, Leader McConnell will be leader till the new session. Or I don't know when John Thune becomes the majority leader. He won it like by 1 vote yesterday. He and John Cornyn really had a 1-vote showdown, and I hope they're good friends. They've been together for a long time. The Senate will work well. Congratulations to John Thune. Thank you to John Cornyn and Rick Scott for continuing to serve and to serve well their states, the country. Every conservative, every Republican, all 3 of those men, great conservatives, and they all ought to vote against Big Pharma. Go to pharmawindfall.com, pharmawindfall.com. Don't let Chuck Schumer on his way out the door spend another $1 gazillion that we need for the budget reconciliation process to get actual stuff done, like building ships, submarines, satellites, cyber, and hypersonic. Don't let him do that. We need, if he's good, if he's a responsible majority leader, he'll start the confirmation process for Marco Rubio and everybody else, including Matt Gaetz. I don't think he'll end the confirmation. I don't think Gaetz will get through, but I don't want legislation passed during the lame duck because they lost everything. We won the House. Everyone's called the House for the Republicans. I think it's going to be 223. It's going to be 223, Dwayne. And now Matt Gaetz is retired, so it's 222.
Well, yeah, I think what happens, we're still on track. I think there's 2 races left to call. and I think it's 220 right now that have been hard confirmed. So there's 2 races left. I think that gets us to 222. And with the 2 vacancies, there's 3 vacancies now, right?
But
Because
there won't be a vacancy until after. Only Matt Gaetz is a vacancy.
right.
Mike Waltz won't quit until January 21. Elise Stefanik won't quit until
Okay,
January
so in
21.
January, then the majority is down to two. You need 216 then, right? Instead of
So
218.
you need 217.
217.
Oh, you're right. You need 216. Vic Mattis is co-host of the Getting Hammered podcast. He is the weekend editor at the Washington Free Beacon. And I get to have lunch with him today. Vic, how are you, my friend?
I'm very excited. I hope it's a buffet.
It's not a buffet. You know I hate buffets. We're not going to the what do you call those? The Swedish buffet that used to be in Warren, Ohio, and my parents would always mumble something as we drove by. Kids always wanted to go, and my smart parents would never take us in there. No, it's not a buffet. Vic, tell me something. There are 2 buckets of Trump nominees, and I don't know if you and Mary Catherine have done this yet. Has Getting Hammered gotten to the nominees yet?
No, it's going to be this afternoon.
Okay. So we have category A. Yay! Hooray! We've got Marco Rubio at the State Department, Mike Waltz at the National Security Advisor. My son works for Mike. I always disclose that. We've got Lee Zeldin going to EPA. We have got, I like Pete Hegseth at Defense, by the way. I'm a big Pete fan. And I like a bunch of people. Then we got category B. No, don't really know them. And then category C. No, not now, not ever, never. And that would be Matt Gaetz. Who do you put in category C?
That would be Matt Gaetz. I have to kind of put Tulsi Gabbard in that as well. And I get it. I mean, look, there was a possibility that, Tulsi Gabbard was, again, former Democrat, that she was going to possibly be on the short list for Secretary of Defense. So it's great news that she's not that, and she's over just, at DNI. And I shouldn't say that, national intelligence is a small thing, because it's not. But it could be worse. On the other hand, when she goes through confirmation, they are going to bring up things like her opinion of, let's say, Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and how she feels about Syria in the war. There are problems there. But I would say nothing nearly as bad as Trump's selection of Matt Gaetz to be the top law enforcement officer in the country, the Attorney General. I'm not sure what to make of it, Hugh, because on the one hand, you want to give the president-elect benefit of the doubt that he's playing some sort of 3D chess. He gets, Gates out of the house, and he doesn't make it into confirmation. On the other hand, Occam's razor, he spoke to him, sweet-talked him on Trump Force One, and suddenly Trump makes a decision. Great, you're loyal to me, which is very true. And I want you to clean house and get rid of that deep state, which obviously he wants to do, and a lot of Americans feel that way. Totally taking the rest of the Trump transition team by surprise and bringing just a little bit of baggage with him.
Now, is it possible that the president-elect is playing 4D chess? I know people mock this, but Gates quit the House yesterday, and that's good. And the House Ethics Committee, all the paperwork doesn't go away. It gets sent to the Senate and the FBI for the full field background investigation. That's bad. And the confirmation hearings are subject to 18 U.S.C. 1001 False Statements Act. So but the first recess won't happen. I believe in recess appointments if they are for a real recess. The Scalia originalist branch don't believe real recesses occur except between sessions, but I am of the opinion that a long recess counts. But, I'm open to anything on the law. I just don't think he should be anywhere near the 5th floor of the Department of Justice. And I'm a justice veteran. And I haven't found anyone yet who's a Justice Department veteran who agrees that he should be. I think it's a massive fail.
Yeah, it's funny. You worked at the Justice Department. Hugh, I was once an intern at the Justice Department.
I didn't know that, Vic. I did not know that.
Yes, so I feel very strongly about this as well. It is funny to see out there on social media the people who have come fiercely and staunchly to defend the president's selection, and suddenly Matt Gaetz, and suddenly people like you and Byron York are, never Trumpers. That makes no sense to me. The fact is, you're calling it in the way Byron called it, and other people who called it, who do like the president, are saying it's a bad idea. Andy McCarthy thinks this, and he is a very serious prosecutor. So, yes, there is a possibility.
I'm not a never Trumper, but I would love the Federalist Society's in town. I'm not a member of the Federalist Society. I've never joined any group unless it is a place that I can have lunch. That's the only thing I join is places where I can have lunch. And so the Federalist Society's in town. And I believe if they said, okay, we're going to have a panel on the good qualities of Matt Gaetz, who wants to volunteer? No one would volunteer for that panel.
Yeah. I think that I think that's
Thousands of
correct.
conservative lawyers.
Yeah. There is also a fear, and I know Ed Whelan has brought this up, of the president somehow invoking, I think it's Article 2, Section 3, where he can, adjourn both houses for a recess. And in that moment, in that time of 10 days or whatever it is, get in his recess appointments, and namely Matt Gaetz, and have him ensconced there for at least a couple of months. I don't think that's going to happen. That would be crazy. But again, at this point, anything can happen. But I'd like to think that this is a twofer. Again, the hopeful part of me, meaning that he resigns from the House, Matt Gaetz. He doesn't
already
make
done
it
that.
into the Senate. Yeah, he resigns from the House.
He's already done that.
And by the way, that also prevented, I believe, the House Ethics Committee. They no longer have jurisdiction. Yes, over that investigation, those allegations surrounding Matt Gaetz. So they won't be able to just publish that or make that public.
Why not?
But as you mentioned. Yeah, well, apparently that goes over, as you say, to the Senate now, right? I mean, and they have to, and the FBI. So it's kind of a mess, and it was impulsive, I think, of Trump to do this. And I know he likes to, stir it up. And John Fetterman, the Democratic senator from Pennsylvania, says it's a super troll move. Yeah, I mean, he's getting a real rise from everybody, but also people on his side. And there are people who want the president to succeed. Everybody should. I just don't think that this is helpful. And again,
well, let's celebrate the good stuff.
Yeah.
Let's celebrate the good stuff. Who's your favorite appointee that needs confirmation?
Okay. Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor. I think he's just a very solid pick. Also
Doesn't need confirmation, though. Doesn't need confirmation.
Oh, he does. Okay, right. Well, they have Marco Rubio, it's Secretary of State. That is a very big job. And you're thinking about people who, particularly in this time and with what's happening in the world, particularly in the Middle East and Israel. Israel needs a friend, and they're going to get. They are going to get two friends, namely, besides President Trump, Marco Rubio at State, and Elise Stefanik to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Staunch defenders of Israel's right to exist. So that's the good news, I really think. And Pete Hegseth is such an interesting choice. It's unfair, and it's bad of me that when I first heard the news, my first thought was, Trump has selected somebody from, Fox and Friends Weekend or the occasional co-host. But of course, Pete is more than that. He's 2 Bronze Stars, served in Afghanistan and Iraq. And he went to Princeton and Harvard. So he's clearly smart, and he's very patriotic. And it's a great morale booster. The troops love him. He does a lot for our men and women in military. So I think that is a terrific choice, especially if you want to boost recruitment. Recruitment is suffering right now. And everybody who, wants to make fun of him, I mean, could he do worse than Lloyd Austin? So I mean,
no,
that's
no.
Yeah.
And I tell everyone, go get his book, The War on Warriors. I have replayed and I posted at YouTube my interview with Pete from June when the book came out. He will fix the recruitment crisis because he talks about why you want to serve and how you want to serve and why it's good for you and your family and the country to serve. And I expect other great appointees below him as the DEP, as the under, as the service secretaries. I think he'll get well briefed on stuff he doesn't know about. And the most important thing, know what you don't know. And, he doesn't know the Navy. We talked about the Navy. He doesn't know the Navy, but I don't know the Navy. I don't know anything. But there have been a lot of civilians who've gone in there and done a good job. And Pete's not a civilian, but he's also not a general officer. He's not going to bring his entire staff from his last billet with him, surround himself with that, and go to town. Let me talk a little bit about Elise Stefanik. I want her staff is probably going to go with her to the UN if President-elect Trump allows it. And they ought to present her with a going away present from the House conference. Just a big diamond encrusted I veto so that she can go to the National Security and just raise this card that says I veto. Because I think it's going to be grand. I worry about what the Security Council is going to do between now and January 21. What do you think, Vic?
Yeah, no, I agree. She's not scared of the criticism and I mean, we saw how she performed, particularly with the anti-Semitic encampments on campus, and how she went after the university presidents, Claudine Gay and others. And what you saw there, if you are in the United Nations, whether you be on the staff of our own country or these other countries, I would be kind of scared because she's going to shake things up. But again, as you said, the key is this very small window that we have between the announcement of her nomination and her confirmation, and what the UN does in between now and then. Because already, and the Biden administration in this truly lame duck situation that they find themselves in, it's hard to tell how they're going to react with regard to Israel versus Iran, and what they're going to do. I'd like to think that Biden would feel unfettered and would be able to now just come to Israel's defense, because I think that's his gut instinct. But we'll have to wait
I
and
hope
see.
you and Mary Catherine on the next edition of Getting Hammered, the podcast that you should be listening to, your morning show for any time in the day, except when you're listening to Hugh Hewitt, is talk about the Musk Vivek Doge Department of Government Efficiency. I actually think it could be a great thing, but it's got no statutory authority. So all they have to do is lay out a blueprint for the second reconciliation. I lay this out in my Fox News column today. First reconciliation is Trump tax cuts and things like zeroing out NPR and the Corporation for Public Broadcast, et cetera. The next one in 2026, they can implement whatever the commission comes up with if that affects spending and budget. Do you have hopes for that, Vic? That commission?
uh, you know, Realistically speaking, I'd say no. I mean, they have their work cut out for them. On the other hand, I never imagined that, a booster rocket could not only be used once, but return to Earth and not even be fished out of the ocean, but land back, on the launch pad. So, I mean, with Elon, obviously, pretty much anything is, and there you go, anything is possible. So I'd like to think about that, as well as the Department of Education. I know there's a panic going on, and what's going to happen to all the children, as they like to say, think about the children. But the Department of Education didn't come about. It's not like it's been with us since 1776. It was like,
No,
more than
1979.
200. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say more than 200 years later, they will be fine. Getting rid of all that bureaucratic chaff, that's the important thing.
I want to play one cut for you, please. I played it in the first hour. I want to play it again. Cut number 16. I was on Fox with Dana Perino and Bill Hemmer yesterday.
Hugh, would love your historical perspective here.
Well, I worked for Richard Nixon out of college, Dana, and up until this moment, Richard Nixon was the greatest political comeback story in American political history. Now Donald Trump is the greatest political comeback story in American political history, because Richard Nixon was never shot in the head. And so I think we are witnessing history today, and it's going to continue to unfold. Very happy with the rapid rollout of the team across all the different silos. More will be coming, no doubt, in short order. Good campaign, great transition, hopefully an extraordinarily successful second term for Donald Trump.
I was on with Trey Gowdy and Josh Kroshauer, Bill and Dana. It was great. Donald Trump was landing on Trump Force One at Andrews, I believe, and walking down the steps, and we were talking about it is the greatest comeback, political comeback in American history. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas joins me. He's newly elected the conference chair of the United States Senate. Congratulations, Senator. What does the conference chair do?
I'm sorry, you broke up there for a moment. What was that?
Okay, my first question is congratulations on winning election as the conference chair. What does the conference chair do?
The conference chair presides over our conference meetings. So, for instance, in those elections yesterday, John Barrasso presided over them. Anytime we gather to have an internal conversation or debate, I'll be presiding over them. Externally, it's primarily focused on communications. We have a whole suite of studios for TV and radio, podcasts. We run the social media, organize press conferences, travel with senators back to their home states or on trips to the border or overseas to help communicate our message. And then obviously I'll be active, as I have been for the Trump campaign, on behalf of the whole conference in the media, advancing and defending our ideas and our legislation. So I'm very, very grateful and appreciative of my colleagues and their trust in putting me in this position, and look forward to doing even more great things for the people of Arkansas and our nation.
Senator, you're very familiar with the Commentary podcast. You were their honoree once. You're very familiar with the Ruthless podcast. I'm sure you listen to Getting Hammered. Do you think it is within the ability of the conference to actually produce good podcasting that informs and educates America?
I do. Yeah, I do, Hugh. And the good thing about podcasts are you don't necessarily have to have massive reach, but if you reach the right audiences who are interested in your topic, you can have significant influence. And that can be something like the Commentary podcast that talks about American politics or the strategic situation in the Middle East, or it can be a podcast about Ohio State football or
Well, that would reach a lot of people.
Cleveland Brown football, such as it is.
Not so much.
So I'm not necessarily saying that we'll have a podcast that rivals the reach of the Ruthless podcast or Joe Rogan, but I do think it's something that can keep the American people informed, and especially keep those people who follow the Senate closely and want Republican senators to succeed in enacting President Trump's agenda well informed.
I'm happy to lend you Harley, but don't hire him away. Harley can edit from the West Coast, but don't hire him away. Senator, let's talk about Pete Hegseth. You're on the Armed Services Committee, and I'm concerned about the idiocy that was said about Pete yesterday. I know you're not going to declare support. Maybe you will. I don't know, really. But I want him to get a fair hearing because I think he's a very good choice.
Yeah, Pete certainly deserves a fair hearing, just like any nominee deserves a fair hearing. And frankly, he deserves a lot more respect than people like Liz Warren is giving him. They want to belittle him as quote unquote a Fox News host. Well, first off, there's nothing wrong with being a Fox News host. Fox has many great hosts that do important work to keep the American people informed, or on the opinion shows to give the view of center-right Americans. Second, though, Pete is much more than quote unquote just a Fox News host. He's a highly decorated veteran. I think he deployed 3 times to the Middle East.
Correct.
If I'm not mistaken, plus a time in Guantanamo Bay. He spent a lot of time in the defense policy world. He's written multiple books, including a recent book, The War on Warriors, which is a very strong prescription for what needs to happen in the military to get the military back focused on its core mission, which is our national security, not social engineering. So Pete, of course, deserves a fair hearing, like all of the president's nominees do. But he deserves a lot more respect than someone like Liz Warren gives him, a woman who lied about being an Indian on a job application that she otherwise might not have gotten.
I'm so glad you said that, and I think he will be confirmed because I believe anyone who reads The War on Warrior is going to understand he knows what he's talking about. There are a lot more positions at the Department of Defense, though. DepSec, Undersecretary, the service secretaries. Have you had any intimations that those will be following quickly?
Just a few conversations here and there, Hugh. The president obviously has many, many jobs to pick. I'm happy to let him bounce ideas off of me or provide names if he asks for them. At the same time, I know he's inundated with job seekers and lots of good idea fairies visiting Mar-a-Lago every day to sprinkle good idea dust all over the place. So I'm confident that he's going to be moving a strong slate of nominees for defense and all across the government. And it'll be a mix of people, I think, like a Pete Hegseth, who has deep knowledge of the military from the front lines and from study, if not deep experience inside the Pentagon, and those people who are experienced in the Pentagon. Remember, this is an unusual situation we find ourselves in, where President Trump is returning for office. You might call it more of a first term than a second term, because there was a clean break, but that means all the people who worked for him in his first term are still available. People who helped implement President Trump's agenda in the cabinet the last time around now have a chance to come back, maybe move up in some cases as well, having had that seasoning the first time.
Now, Senator, of course, I wrote a column about the budget reconciliation process because everybody wants to know about that and for Fox News, and nobody does know about that. And I'm going to ask you a question about that. But first, on appointments generally that need Senate confirmation, he can't make a nomination till he's inaugurated. Can you hold hearings before the inauguration?
Yes, Hugh. In fact, that's customary. the way this will happen is a new Congress will be sworn in on January 3rd. We should, with clear election results, unlike we've had the last two times because of Georgia runoff elections, we should have an organizing resolution passed. Committees should be constituted, and I would like to see us process as many confirmation hearings as we can between January 3rd and January 20th. On January 20th at noon, the president will put his hand on the Bible and take the oath and give an outstanding inaugural speech, and then he'll walk inside the Capitol. And at that very moment, I will expect him to sign dozens of nominations, formally submitting nominees to the Senate, whose confirmation hearings will have already been conducted. We should settle for, at a minimum, what happened in 2009 when Barack Obama took over. That's 9 nominees to the cabinet in the first 2 days. I think we should go for a lot more than that, but we should see if the Democrats want to do it the easy way, which is consenting to move these along in an expeditious fashion, or if they're going to compel us to do it the hard way, which is grinding it out and using the rules of the Senate to process these nominees promptly. We'll see, but I expect that the president will get his nominees in place promptly and efficiently, more so than we did in 2017.
Can a hearing be held before the FBI full field background investigation is done?
Traditionally not, Hugh. That is usually done before hearing is complete. I would expect the FBI to conduct those hearings in a very prompt, or those background checks in very prompt fashion, though. And one thing I will not tolerate, which we saw some in the first Trump administration, is either the FBI dragging its feet because a nominee is in disfavor with deep staters over at the Department of Justice, or refusing to close it, or otherwise weaponizing classification or security background checks and classification decisions against the president and his nominees.
The last question on nominations, and it's a general one. I've made the assertion I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. The prohibition on false statements in 18 U.S.C. 1001 is a felony prohibition on making false statements to the government. Does it apply to testimony of nominees?
Hugh, anytime you testify in front of Congress or any other government body, it does. Of course, I'm not concerned about that. I expect all of the president's nominees to be forthright and frank, and many of them will have great stories to tell about what they've done in their lives and also what they plan to do as they take over these departments and agencies.
All right, now let me talk about budget and reconciliation. Budget needs to be agreed to, is my understanding, by the House and the Senate, and then bills that implement that budget require a simple majority. If I'm right, how soon can we get the budget in place?
Well, hopefully very soon, Hugh. Typically, that will start in the House. Some of these bills must start in the House under the Constitution since they are revenue-raising bills. The House obviously has a pretty tight margin. I think we will probably start our work on January 20th on the January 3rd on the president's nominees, and let the House take the lead on some of the budget questions and the big bill that we'll need to pass next year that will extend and enhance the tax cut bill from 2017, hopefully do a lot more on things like energy as well. And then they'll have to pass those bills first and then to the Senate. But I hope that we can do it sooner rather than later. That'll probably be the most consequential piece of legislation next year. Many of those tax measures expire at the end of the year, and I'd like to give our families and businesses as much lead time and clarity and certainty as they can have.
Amen. Now, I'm going to lobby you, Senator, on the air. I would like you to zero out NPR and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting because I make my living the old-fashioned way. I earn the audience. I earn the revenue. I don't think they should be subsidized a dime. Don't want them to go away. Fine by them to beg. Nothing against some good quality product like Steve Inskeep. They should not get a dime from the federal government. You think that's possible?
Well, and then with that funding, you want to use that for deficit reduction or subsidize Ohio sports teams?
The latter. Obviously, we ought to be able to do the latter, but I do want it. Just finally, I would like a level playing field.
That is the kind of thing, Hugh. Yes, that could be done either in reconciliations process. Obviously, the Democrats have more say in the latter than they do in the former. But I do expect us, given that the Democrats stretch the boundaries of what's typically done in this budget reconciliation process in 2021 and 2022, to be as creative as we can be within the constraints of the Constitution and our congressional rules to deliver on President Trump's agenda.
Yeah, everything is up to the Senate parliamentarian, right? When it finally comes to you, trailer bills either up or down, depending on what the parliamentarians say.
Ultimately, but again, she's not making decisions just willy nilly or based on her own. I mean, it's akin to our common law system in the courts. Once a thing has been done, it becomes a precedent of the Senate. So those are different in 2025 than they were in 2017.
I hope Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy for the DOGE go find a retired Senate parliamentarian, because what they do won't matter unless it gets through. Senator Tom Cotton, thank you. Congratulations on becoming the chairman of the conference and on your podcasting plans and on your alternative media plans. But because, boy, legacy media is broken and dead, and you need to fill the gap. And I appreciate your talking to me. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Hugh.
I didn't bring up Arkansas football because I am a gentleman. But Ohio State is not perfect. They did lose to Oregon. Didn't ask them to defund University of Oregon. We'll beat them in the Big Ten championship round and take them to task there. And in the meantime, looking forward to the conference has always been led by smart people, Roy Blunt and John Barrasso, and now Tom Cotton. And the conference matters a lot. The leader manages the floor. The whip manages the leader's management of the floor, and the conference chair does ideas. I'm very happy that Senator Cotton is in that job. Josh Kraushaar, editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. He and I were on with Dana and Bill yesterday when Donald Trump returned in triumph to Washington, D.C., but before the Gates nomination. Josh, I don't think Matt Gates gets confirmed. Do you?
I don't know, Hugh, and I think this is going to be, number one, a very important first test of John Thune's leadership as Senate Majority Leader, how much deference he gives Trump. I agree. I've heard everything you've said, Hugh, about Gates. I was shocked when I heard the news, though it's sort of, I guess I can't say I was surprised, but I was shocked. He's long been a advisor and part of Trump's inner circle. I didn't think he had the votes, and I didn't think that he would ultimately pick him. But that is the kind of person who is gonna that's what a lot of Republicans are worried about, the worst excesses of Trump.
Now, he's got such a great slate. I talked to Dr. Orrin earlier today. He's thrilled with Elise Stefanik. He's thrilled with Marco Rubio. He's thrilled with Michael Waltz. The national security team is great. And along comes this spanner, and I'm thinking to myself, one of two things happened. Matt Gates wants to be a martyr so he can run for governor, or Kevin McCarthy set this up. Which is more likely?
Well, I know how Kevin McCarthy feels about Matt Gates. You see this coalition in the Trump movement where you have, about half, or probably more than half of the party is still sort of traditional conservatives that believe in the policies that we've long followed dating back to the days of Reagan. But you have the isolationists, you have the populists, you have the MAGA folks, the hardcore MAGA folks who really have been drawn to some of the more disruptive figures like a Matt Gates. So, I mean, look, this is and as far as national security goes, I agree with you, Hugh. I think we talked about this on Fox, that, it's an A-list team with Rubio and Stefanik, CIA with Ratcliffe. I mean, when we were talking about the picks yesterday, you couldn't have asked for better selections. But then you had Tulsi Gabbard also nominated yesterday at DNI, and her comments on Russia, her comments, and her votes, frankly, as a Democrat in the House vis-a-vis Israel and Iran, raising a lot of red flags as well, and certainly not part of the traditional conservative consensus. So a lot has changed in the last 12, 24 hours. And the big question, as you noted, Hugh, can they get confirmed? That's going to be the big test going forward.
And we still have Interior, OMB, and Treasury. Interior, people don't know this. It's the greatest obstacle to economic growth in the United States. And OMB is the place you go to get regulations cut. Any buzz on either of these?
Not on those two. I mean, the name that I hear the most about is, as far as Treasury goes, is Scott Bessent, if I'm pronouncing his last name right, who's a close confidant and was an economic advisor to the Trump campaign, helped fundraise for the campaign. He's someone who I think is the favorite still, even though we haven't seen any movement on that front. But and I think that's someone who Wall Street and a lot of conventional conservatives would get behind, as well as the majority in the Republican Senate.
The market is loving Donald Trump's return. Just absolutely loving it. And I think we're going to have a boom, and it's going to go for 6 or 8 months. What does the Federal Reserve do if the boom inches up? I mean, would they dare raise rates?
Oh, I don't. Well, I mean, I think there is. I've read some respected economic analysts that worry that inflation, if there's too much spending, if tax cuts, the additional tax cuts, or if I guess they're extended as they're due to expire this year, there could be a risk of inflation again going forward. So I think that's something to watch for, and also the independence of the Fed is another issue that's going to come up. Going forward, but the economic news, as far as I can see it, both right now and all the leading indications in the short term, have been quite positive.
Yeah, tax cuts help productivity, and deficits don't matter unless you're giving people spending money that they go out and spend immediately to chase too few goods. It's astonishing to me sometimes how people talk about inflation. It's a question of productivity and the money supply. Yeah, you don't want to spend too much, but tax cuts are productivity plus. Let me close by this. Do you think Netanyahu is happy or sad about the turn of events in the United States?
Pretty happy. I think looking from the picks when it comes to national security, when it comes to Israel, whether it's Mike Huckabee as ambassador, whether it's Rubio as Sec State, Waltz as Sec Defense, these are very pro-Israel, anti-Iran folks. So I think the reaction.
Are you worried, Josh? Are you worried about the Security Council between now and January 21? Because that's what Obama did. He hurt Israel badly in the lame duck. We have 1 minute.
Yeah, quickly. I'm not. I don't think the Biden folks are the same as the Obama folks. They're not as vengeful. If anything, based on what's gone on since Trump's election, they've actually sort of moved to the middle. They've not. There was a lot of talk that they could, punish Israel for humanitarian issues in Gaza. There was a deadline that came up last week, and they ended up not enforcing that, and it ended up not being an issue. So I don't. The Obama folks, I think, on Israel were uniquely
anti-Zionist. They were anti-Zionist,
yeah.
And I hope you're right. I do worry about the UN and Security Council, but I trust you. Josh Kraushaar on Twitter, Jewish Insider, a must go to find out what's going on inside the American Jewish Committee and a good perspective on Israel.